Let's move on to the sixth trigger, which is a real-time trigger called as SignalR Trigger. So SignalR Trigger is used in scenarios where you need to process or respond to events in real time. So let's dive into the SignalR Trigger code base. So it's a pretty simple code base, as you can see. The function name is called on client message. In this case, it's decorated by the function attribute signaling the Azure Functions runtime that this is an Azure function and it has to create the runtime and take care of end-to-end processing of this particular function. So now whenever there is a message or whenever a client calls the SignalR endpoint, this function needs to wake up. So how does this function wake up? It is through the SignalR trigger. So what does the SignalR trigger need to wake up this function? You can specify a lot of criteria for the SignalR trigger to signal the Azure Functions runtime to evaluate this before waking up this function. Number one is hub name. So what hub should the runtime watch for changes or messages? You can also specify the category of messages that the runtime needs to check. You can also specify the event type of the message before the Azure runtime invokes this particular function. Then you need to specify the input parameters which the runtime can use to serialize or deserialize the incoming data, event data. And before all of this, you need to specify the connection string, which is the main indicator of which SignalR endpoint the Azure Function runtime needs to watch for new incoming messages. And then once you specify all of these criteria for the Azure Functions runtime to evaluate before invoking this function, that helps the Azure Functions runtime. So once it identifies that there's a new message which satisfies all these criteria, then it creates an invocation context. It deserializes the message into these parameters, the C# types that we have specified. So the user and message that is coming in the incoming payload is serialized into these simple strings, user and message. It also creates the invocation context, which gives you the metadata about the SignalR connection, SignalR hub, and all that data. So you can use both the metadata and the incoming event data in your function, do some processing, and then direct the processed output to any of the Azure resources as we have discussed earlier. So in this case, it's again sending the process SignalR message back to another SignalR hub. So we are composing a serialized message, SignalR message to be broadcasted to a different SignalR connection specified over here, and the hub name specified over here. In this case, it's the same hub name. It's called chat hub. This is the output binding, which indicates the Azure Functions runtime that this is the destination. So after processing, the Azure Functions runtime will direct all the processed output to this particular destination.